In 1944, America was 3 years into the Second World War. Fathers, brothers, and sons were in Normandy, in the Pacific, in training camps across the country. At home, gasoline was rationed, rubber was rationed, sugar was rationed. And into that gray, exhausted summer rolled the loudest, brightest, most extravagant thing left in the United States, Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, the greatest show on earth. The show traveled by rail on more than 100 cars. It carried elephants, big cats, a full brass band, and a canvas big top that took hours to raise. That tent was roughly 425 feet long and 180 feet wide. 6 center poles held it up. It weighed around 19 tons. And it was, by design, waterproof. That's the detail everything turns on. Canvas soaks up rain. Wet canvas rots, doubles in weight, and tears. So circuses waterproofed their tents the way circuses had done it for decades. They dissolved paraffin wax in a solvent, painted the mixture onto the canvas, and let the solvent evaporate. The wax stayed behind and sealed the fabric. In peacetime, the solvent of choice was a proper commercial thinner, but this was 1944. Industrial solvents were going to the war effort. So the Ringling crews used what they could still buy in bulk, roughly 1,800 pounds of paraffin dissolved in about 6,000 gallons of gasoline and brushed across 19 tons of cloth. Here is the part that should stop you. That was not a secret. It was not illegal. It was not even unusual. There was no federal standard requiring flame-resistant tent canvas, no state inspection that would have caught it. The tent had passed through dozens of cities that season, and in every one of them, the local fire marshal saw a tent, not a fuel. But the coating wasn't the only thing wrong that week. The show had already run out of luck before it reached Hartford, and one of its own oldest superstitions had just come true. The circus was supposed to arrive in Hartford on July 5th. It arrived late, so late that the afternoon show on the 5th was canceled, and among circus people, a missed performance was considered the worst omen in the business. The crews said so out loud. Then they set up anyway. The lot was on Barber Street, in the north end of the city. On the morning of July 6th, the weather was hot and clear. The evening performance was the big one. The matinee was expected to be quiet. It wasn't. Estimates of the matinee crowd run between 6,000 and 8,000 people. And because it was a weekday afternoon in wartime, the audience was overwhelmingly women and children, mothers, grandmothers, kids on school holiday. Some of them had been brought as a treat by neighbors because their fathers were overseas. Now, count the failures stacking up around them. Failure 1. The circus had no meaningful firefighting capability on the lot. There were water buckets. There were a handful of extinguishers. For a structure covering roughly 76,000 square feet of gasoline-coated canvas, that was decoration. Failure 2. No fire watch was stationed inside the tent during the performance, and no fire truck was standing by on the lot. If something went wrong, the alarm would have to be raised by whoever happened to be looking in the right direction. At this point, the disaster was still avoidable, but the third failure was already bolted into place. Failure 3. The animal chutes. To get lions and tigers safely from their wagons into the ring, the circus assembled long steel tunnels, cage runways, that ran across the ground and out through the side wall of the tent. On July 6th, the Big Cat Act came near the start of the show. When it ended, the cats went back down the chutes, and the chutes stayed where they were. Those steel tunnels sat directly across 2 of the exits. Failure 4 is the quietest one, and it's the one that killed the most people. It isn't an engineering flaw, it's a human one. In an emergency, people do not run to the nearest exit. They run to the exit they came in through. Thousands of people in that tent had entered by the main entrance on the west side. In a crisis, that is where their feet were going to take them, all at once, in the same direction, into the same gap. And there was a warning. 2 years earlier, in August 1942, a fire had swept through the Ringling Menagerie tent in Cleveland, Ohio. No people died. Dozens of animals did. The circus knew from direct experience how fast its canvas burned. Nothing about the waterproofing changed. So here is the tent at 2:40 on July 6th. The flying Walendas are climbing to the high wire. The band is playing. 6,000+ people are looking up. Above them, 19 tons of canvas sealed with wax and gasoline residue. Beside them, 2 exits blocked by steel. Behind them, no fire watch, no hose, no alarm. Every single one of those decisions was reversible that morning. Then, somewhere on the southwest side wall of the tent, near the men's washroom area, a small flame appeared in the canvas. It was about the size of a hand. Someone, almost certainly, had dropped a cigarette. An usher saw it. He threw water at it. Others ran for buckets. For perhaps 30 or 40 seconds, a handful of men genuinely believed they could put it out. They could not. Because the flame was not burning canvas, it was burning the coating on the canvas, and the coating was melting. Fire on treated canvas doesn't spread outward across the surface. It runs upward, fast, and the burning paraffin drips, which means the tent didn't just burn above the crowd, it rained on them. Bandmaster Merle Evans saw the flame from the bandstand and did the only thing he could do. He cut the music and struck up Stars and Stripes Forever, the Circus Disaster March, the signal every roustabout, clown and animal handler in the business understood as emergency now. The crew understood it instantly. The audience heard a march and, for a few seconds, kept clapping. That's the last moment the story is still recoverable. What happened over the next 8 minutes made Hartford the deadliest fire in Connecticut history. Remember what everything now depends on: a canvas roof coated in gasoline and wax over 7,000 people, with 2 exits blocked by steel cages. 2:42. The fire reaches the roof line. From outside the tent, witnesses on Barber Street see a column of black smoke go up so fast that several of them assume something exploded. Inside, the crowd finally moves. The bleachers empty from the bottom up, which means the people in the high seats have to climb down through everyone below them. Some don't. Some jump. 2:43. Ringmaster Fred Bradna tries to give instructions. The public address system doesn't carry. Whatever he's saying, almost no one can hear him over 6,000 people trying to leave at once. Outside, a photographer captures the image that would run in newspapers around the world. Emmett Kelly, the circus's most famous clown, still in his hobo makeup, carrying a bucket of water toward a fire the size of a building. That single photo gave the disaster its nickname, The Day the Clowns Cried. 2:44. The alarm reaches the Hartford Fire Department. Engines are dispatched. They will arrive to find that there is essentially nothing left to fight. At the northeast side of the tent, hundreds of people reach the exits and find the steel animal chutes. Some try to climb over them. Some are pinned against them. The crush at those blocked exits is where the largest concentration of bodies would later be found. Now imagine standing in that crowd. You can't see the exit. You can't hear instructions. The air above you is burning, and pieces of it are falling. What saved hundreds of people was improvised and immediate. Men, circus workers, soldiers on leave, ordinary fathers, pulled out pocket knives and slashed the side walls open, creating exits that didn't exist a minute earlier, then hauled strangers through the gaps. One of them was a Ringling employee named William Curley. He carried children out of the tent. He went back. He did not come out. 2:48, or close to it. The center poles are still standing, but there is no tent on them. The canvas is gone, 19 tons of it, consumed in roughly 8 minutes. What remains on the ground is metal seating frames, folding chairs, and the dead. The official toll would settle at 167. More than 700 were injured. The majority of the dead were women and children, and dozens were under the age of 10. The tent that killed them had been advertised that morning as the safest and grandest structure of its kind in the world. But when investigators started working through the wreckage, the cigarette everyone was blaming turned out to be the least certain fact in the entire case. The investigation was immediate and enormous. Connecticut State Police, the Hartford Fire Marshal's Office, the state's attorney, and a coroner's inquest all worked the same lot. The first question was the coating, and it was answered almost at once. Ringling did not deny it. The paraffin and gasoline waterproofing was standard practice, openly used, and the company confirmed the composition. What the inquest established was the consequence. The coating turned a fire-resistant delay of minutes into a total loss in under 10. The second question was responsibility. And here the case moved fast. 5 Ringling officials were charged and convicted of involuntary manslaughter, among them the vice president, the general manager, and men directly responsible for the lot and the seating. The circus did something almost unheard of. It did not fight the claims. Ringling accepted liability and agreed to pay, ultimately distributing roughly $5 million, an amount that kept the company alive but effectively mortgaged its future for years. And the third question, the one in the title of this video, was never actually answered. A discarded cigarette was and remains the leading theory. It fits the location. It fits the timing. It fits how the flame behaved. But no investigator ever recovered physical proof of it. The official cause of the Hartford Circus fire was, and still is, undetermined, which is why what happened 6 years later caused an uproar. In 1950, in Circleville, Ohio, a 20-year-old man named Robert Dale Seege was arrested in connection with a series of arsons. During questioning, he confessed to something no one had asked him about. He said that in 1944 he had been a laborer with the Ringling Circus, and that he had set the Hartford fire deliberately. Seege had been 14 years old at the time. The confession was sensational, and it collapsed under examination almost as quickly. Connecticut authorities reviewed it and were not satisfied. Seege later recanted. He was convicted of arson in Ohio for unrelated fires, but he was never tried for Hartford, and the state never treated the case as solved. So the honest answer is uncomfortable. We do not know who started the fire. What we know for certain is what turned a small flame into 167 deaths. And that part was decided months earlier by men with brushes and buckets of gasoline. There is one more thread, and it ran for almost half a century. Among the dead was a girl of about 6 years old whose face was almost untouched. Her photograph was circulated across Connecticut and reprinted for years. Nobody claimed her. She was buried under the number assigned to her body, 1565. In 1991, 47 years later, a Hartford fire investigator named Rick Davey published the results of his own long re-examination of the records and identified her as Eleanor Emily Cook, 8 years old, who had come to the matinee with her mother and 2 brothers. Her brother Edward also died that day. Eleanor was exhumed and reburied beside him in Southampton, Massachusetts. The identification has been questioned by some researchers ever since, and it has never been proven beyond dispute. Her original grave marker still stands in Hartford. That is the shape of this disaster. The cause is unproven. One victim's name is still argued over, but the reason so many died was never mysterious at all. Hartford is one of the fires that rewrote American life safety law, and you have been protected by it without ever knowing. The most direct change was to the canvas itself. Flame-resistant treatment of tent fabric moved from optional to mandatory. Today, in the United States, temporary membrane structures and tents used for public assembly must be built from flame-resistant material and carry documented certification. That small white label stitched into the wall of a wedding marquee or a festival tent exists because of Barber Street. The second change was exits. Hartford is one of the case studies behind modern assembly occupancy rules: minimum number of exits, minimum exit width calculated from occupant load, and the requirement that means of egress be kept clear and unobstructed at all times. The steel animal chutes across those two exits are the single clearest reason that last rule exists. The third change was supervision, standby fire watch, on-site extinguishing equipment, and inspection of temporary public venues before the public is admitted became normal practice rather than local goodwill. And the fourth change was quieter and permanent. The American touring circus never really recovered its confidence in the big top. Within about a decade, Ringling abandoned tent performances altogether and moved into arenas and stadiums. Permanent buildings with permanent fire protection. The lot on Barber Street is not empty. In 2005, a memorial was dedicated there, a bronze circle marking the center of the ring, ringed by the names of the dead, in the exact place where the tent stood. So the next time you walk into a stadium, a conference hall, or a festival tent, look for the illuminated exit signs and the clear aisles and the little certification tag on the fabric. None of that is decoration. Every piece of it was paid for in advance by 167 people who went to the circus on a Thursday afternoon. They were killed by a flame the size of a hand, and by a cheaper solvent, chosen during a war by men who were absolutely certain it would never matter. Next time, another disaster where the fatal decision was made years earlier by someone who thought they were saving money. Subscribe if you want to see it when it goes up.